do so many overstays happen? Because people rely on HR timelines instead of checking their own I-94, is it?
A lot of people get confused, and a lot of people unfortunately just assume that because they have a paycheck, they can just start counting the grace period whenever the after the last day on the pay statement, because they feel that USCIS will just look at their pay statement and then count the grace period from that date. So that is the reason where I saw a lot of people make a mistake. That is one case. And a lot of people also don't look at their I94. That's also another reason why I've seen a lot of people make a mistake. Because what happens is, when you get a H1B, you get a H1B for 3 years. And some companies, after the end of 3 years, they will not even file for an extension. So people just assume that, hey, my employment with this employer has ended, my 3-year employment. Now I can find a new employer. And they just don't check their I94, because when their initial H1B expires, the I94 also expires. So if that company is not filing for an extension, pretty much the I94 is expired. So now you don't really have a grace period because this company has not filed an extension. And that's also another place where I saw people make a mistake, because they feel that they have 60 more days to find a new employer. No, the 60-day grace period is not available if the first company has not filed for an extension. Another place where I see a problem is, and this is a common question, how many times can you use this grace period? Can I keep changing employers and each time use the 60-day grace period or not? So there is one small caveat with that. So whenever somebody changes their employer and a new employer files for a H1B, people start working on a receipt, which is legal. So some new employer files a H1B and they can work on the receipt. But when it comes to using the grace period, the 60-day grace period is applicable each time they get an approval. So with the employer 1, they get an approval, they get 60-day grace period. And now say they change their employer, they go to the second employer, employer 2, but somebody is working on the receipt. They don't have an approval with that employer. And now if their job terminates, if they've used the grace period in the previous approval period, the grace period is not applicable. The grace period is applicable with the second employer only if they have an approval with the second employer. But if they're working on a receipt, they might not have a grace period. So the 60-day grace period is for each approval copy. So for each time they have an approval, they have a 60-day grace period. So if they're working on a receipt with the next employer, if that case gets approved, yes, they have the 60-day grace period. If not, they might not have the 60-day grace period. So there are some fine nuances that people have to see when they're counting the 60 days. So the 60-day grace period is again discretionary, and there are a few nuances. So everybody should be aware of these nuances and make sure they know the correct calculations. And this is very important to ensure that they're not accidentally violating their grace period and overstaying in this country.